Okay, so I've just packed the door with some small pieces of masonite and MDF and things, and just to get it centered in the aperture and flush with the faces here and along here. And then I've just used some magnets to hold the hinge pin in approximately the location I want it, and also try and hold the door flush with the leg. So now what I'm going to do is just run a weld on the edge of the hinge pin bracket and we should be good. So let's do that now. Okay, there we go. Door's on, hinges all welded on. Now this is clearly gross overkill for somewhat of an aesthetic door, but again, I am going to be, now I'm standing on it, I am going to be using this space inside the door for storage. So the bucket again, the coolant bucket's in there, but I've got this cavity in here which I want to utilise best I can. So inside of the door will be used for hanging equipment. Maybe some of the side can be as well, but predominantly I intended for the back of the door to be used for storage. So there we go. Alright, we're getting closer and closer. So we've salvaged a bit more of the Hercus stand to use as the sheet metal for the door. So I've also just welded a little piece of tube in here, and on the back just a little piece of scrap, and the idea will be I can just make a latch that rotates down and catches this plate here. So I've just got a scrap of 5/16 all thread. It's not a great fit, but again I'm just using scraps that I've got lying around, so I can just make a knob on here. I'll probably make up something pretty flash on the lathe once the lathe is on here, and then I can just put an arm on here and that'll serve as a latch to keep the door closed. So at this point I'm just going to go around and touch up a couple of welds. This door's got some old screw holes in it, so I'll just weld those out, and then I'm going to go and finish sand all these welds on the 3 visible faces. I'm not going to worry about the back, but we'll do the front and the 2 sides, and that'll just make it look a bit better once the paint's on. So that'll be the next job, is to get the sanding done, but I really wanted to make sure I'd done all the fab work so that I don't have to go and sand, weld and repaint after I've done the paint. So let's keep moving on. Well, here's the, geez, I need to go move back a bit to get it in, don't I? Here's the stand. So this is about 3 days after the last footage, because it was 24 hours for the primer to dry, then 24 hours for the first coat and 24 hours for the second coat. So the welding was done a few days ago, and I've just gotten the paint on it, and I've got it into position against the wall here. So I've just docked off, I think this is Teflon. I had some bar stock in the shelf, so I've just cut off some, I don't know, 10mm slices, and the adjusting feet will sit on those. So these metric 10mm bolts will screw directly into the bottom of each leg, and obviously then I can screw this in and out, and that will allow me to level the lathe exactly on this concrete floor, which isn't perfectly level. So at the very least I'll get the bench level, and then I'll be able to individually level the lathe bed itself. So it'd be nice to probably, you know, counterbore these a bit for the heads of the bolts, but I still need to be able to get to them to adjust the distance from the floor. So they'll just sit on the plastic. I could use rubber, but rubber will compress over time and then the lathe will go out of adjustment. Didn't want to use metal, so plastic seemed to be an appropriate choice. Now again, you can buy these machine leveling feet. I've seen them at the local engineering supplies. They're like $20 each or something. So these cost me a couple of dollars for the bolts, and I'll just use whatever stock I had lying around. So just a couple of other features I've probably forgot to mention. Hello, shop dog. While we were working on this, I probably haven't, you know, if you're a purist engineer, you would say, well, this is not a great design because I've welded these long crossbars here, so when the load's on this bench pushing down, these welds are all in shear, which is not an ideal loading scenario for a weld. You'd normally try and avoid that if you're designing a structure, but this is only going to be carrying this lathe, which weighs, I don't know, maybe a couple hundred pounds, 100 kilos. So I'm not too worried about it. And the other reason I wanted these legs open was if I decided I needed to add mass to this bench, maybe to damp vibration or for whatever other reason, I could just fill these with sand. So all 4 of the legs have got the ability for me to just add sand. So that was the main reason I left these open. And it was obviously a compromise with the design of the bench. So obviously the thick sections are used for the rails and they're standing upright, so that gives it the best bending strength, and the rest of it's all just 50mm tube plus the flat bar for the lathe mounts themselves, plus whatever scrap I had lying around to do the rest of it. So coolant bucket in there, my door which will be used to carry some goodies on the inside here in this cavity here, and I'll make up a latch for the door here, which will just catch on this bracket here. Paint's not great. I just rolled it on with a foam roller, and then I just chucked the foam roller out. They're disposable as far as I'm concerned. And again, because I've reused the steel, maybe in the light you'll be able to see some of these blemishes like this, where I've sanded the paint off and I've welded a hole up. So the paint's followed that sanding mark, so I haven't filled it. And again, it's just a workshop bit of equipment. I'm not going to lose sleep. There's a few dags in the paint. Paint was pretty old, so it was starting to skin over, so some of that skins ended up being mixed in. But again, this is workshop equipment, it's not a show car, and 2 coats of gloss enamel will mean I'll be able to wipe it clean if it's covered in coolant or oil or anything else. So that's the fab work done. I'm going to install the feet and level it off, and then I can keep working. So next step will be a plywood backboard for here, just 1/2 inch or 3/4, whatever I've got in the shelf. I'll just use whatever I've got, trying to avoid buying anything else. And then we're going to put an aluminium skin here which will catch the coolant, and I've got to figure out some way of putting a low spot under the lathe so that the coolant drains into it out the bottom, and then it will go back into the coolant drum to be recirculated. So I'll post some of these construction videos up first, and then we will get back to the construction of the rest of the bench. I'll be off for a couple of weeks. We're going to Thailand with the kids for a couple of weeks, so there might be a bit of a break before the next video, but there's plenty here to keep us busy. Hope you're enjoying it. If you've got any questions or comments, please put them in the space below. And I will also put up the SketchUp file that you saw earlier. I'll put that on my website, and you can download it and use it or modify it if you like. And I'll put a link in the description box below. Thanks for watching.